Hi, I'm Darren and welcome to this week's weekly English practice from English Coaching Projects. One day, a robber robbed two banks, and on the way out of each bank, he smiled up at the surveillance cameras. That evening, he was arrested by the police, and he was shocked when they showed him the surveillance tapes. Before he had entered both banks, he had applied or rubbed lemon juice all over his face, which he believed would render him invisible to the surveillance cameras. He was found to be neither crazy nor on drugs. So what made this guy overly confident in his ability to render himself invisible to the surveillance cameras? Well, maybe it's got something to do with the Dunning-Kruger effect. Without trying to sound overly naive, but I would assume to make yourself invisible, you'd have to be extremely clever and have a lot of knowledge about the topic. Or maybe even have the knowledge to realize it's impossible. I hope you enjoy this week's weekly English practice. And as always, there are questions for you to discuss with your friends, your family, your ECB coach. And of course, don't be afraid to send us your answers in writing via email or record your voice via WhatsApp. That's all for this week. Bye bye. Overconfidence, the Dunning-Kruger effect. We all suffer the Dunning-Kruger effect when we don't know enough to know what we don't know. ECP coach Darren finds out more about the phenomenon of overconfidence. One day, a man robbed two banks in broad daylight. He didn't wear a mask or any sort of disguise. He even smiled at surveillance cameras before walking out of each bank. Later that night, he was arrested by the police. When they showed him the surveillance tapes, the robber stared in disbelief. "But I wore the juice," he mumbled. Apparently, the robber thought that rubbing lemon juice in his skin would render him invisible to videotape cameras. After all, lemon juice is used as invisible ink, so as long as he didn't come near a heat source, he should have been completely invisible. The man was neither crazy nor on drugs, he was simply ill-informed. This led to two psychologists, Dunning and Kruger, to do some research. Their studies have shown that people display illusory superiority. We judge ourselves as better than others to a degree that violates the laws of mathematics. The Dunning-Kruger effect refers to the cognitive bias that leads a lot of people to assess their cognitive ability as greater than it actually is. It causes the least qualified to overestimate their skills and the most qualified to underestimate theirs. The less you know about a subject, the less you know how much you don't know, whereas when you truly master a subject, you know how rich and complex it is and how little you master it. People who display high levels of incompetence within a field are incapable to detect and acknowledge their incompetence and do not acknowledge other people's competence. Typical instances of this would be on TV talent shows where some contestants truly believe they are very good singers when in fact they are terrible. Another example of this was when software engineers at two companies were asked to rate their performance. 32% of the engineers at one company and 42% at the other put themselves in the top 5%. Research also indicates that 80% of drivers believe their skills are above average, something that is statistically impossible for obvious reasons. People measurably poor at logical reasoning, grammar, financial knowledge, emotional intelligence, and chess, to name but a few, all tend to rate their expertise almost as highly as actual experts do. Socrates once said that his wisdom was knowing how much he did not know. It probably made very little sense at the time, but now it's obvious just how wise he actually was. The overconfidence of the Dunning-Kruger effect is not simply about showing off. It is a genuine inability to see one's own shortcomings. This week's questions are: what is the double curse of the Dunning-Kruger effect? Why do people think they know more than they do? What, in your opinion, causes the Dunning-Kruger effect? What do you think are the dangers of the Dunning-Kruger effect? Imposter syndrome is the flip side of the Dunning-Kruger effect. How do you think it affects people, and why do you think people would feel this way?